Alright, welcome back, coders. Today we're talking about EV3X2, the assignment NASCAR, driving in a circle, turning left. We're going to do some planning for this assignment, and then we're going to actually try to code out the assignment, and lastly we're going to test it out to see if it works. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to plan this assignment out. What I'd like you to try to do when you think about how you're going to do these assignments, particularly with the robot, they're very similar to in days of old, you would program all on a screen. Basically, you would be planning using something called the turtle, or moving the turtle. Some of you may have done this in the past, done some Scratch style programming or something along those lines, where you program a little what's shown as a dot or an arrow or a turtle on a screen, and you move it around. In this case, our turtle is a real-life robot, so the same principles of the ideas of the turtle are in play, but we are planning out how we want our turtle, so to speak, to move in real life. We're going to start planning our EV3X2. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to find an image of a Cartesian plane, or X and Y coordinates, if you want to think of them as that. I'm just going to find one of these as an image here. I want this one. I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to put it in a notebook here. In fact, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger just so everybody can see. Alright, so let's assume I have a robot here. I'm going to draw him in at this spot right here. Here's my robot. And what I want it to do is drive in a circle. So to do this, I'm going to start off by moving. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to have it turn left. Turn left. And I want it to keep on turning left until the gyroscopic sensor that is on the robot reads that I did a full 360 turn. Now, something to note with your gyroscopic sensor. With your gyroscopic sensor, when you turn left, you go in the negative direction with your gyroscopic sensor. If you turn to the right, you go in the positive direction. So if I'm turning left, like in NASCAR, I'm actually not going to turn until 360 as my readout on my ultrasonic sensor. Instead, I'm going to be going in the negative direction. So I'm actually going until negative 360 degrees. When I turn left, my ultrasonic sensor will be moving in the negative direction, and when I turn to the right, it's going to go in the positive direction. Alright, so let me list out my steps of what I need to do in order to do this in pseudocode. Now that I've made a little graphical way of thinking about how this is going to go, and I've listed out my steps, after I hit 360 degrees here, I want to stop all the motors. That way I end in the same spot that I began. So step 1, I turn left. Step 2, until my gyroscopic sensor, I'll put gyro over here, reads negative 360 degrees. Then I'm going to stop. Alright, let's go into our Lego Mindstorms program now. I'm going to create a new project here. I'm going to go into the JavaScript area here. I'm going to take out all the junk that was already there, and I'm going to put my own name, today's date. I'm going to call this NASCAR. And in pseudocode, with these comments, I'm going to list out the steps that I want to make. I'm going to turn left. I'm going to say curve left. Then when my ultrasonic sensor reaches negative 360 degrees, I want it to stop the motors. All right. Now I could just write this out as simple steps, but there's a good chance that I'm going to want to reuse this code later on. In fact, you are definitely going to want to do that. So I'm going to make all of this stuff a function. I'm going to go into my advanced section here, and I'm going to go to functions. I'm just going to use remember there's two things that we can do with functions. We can either declare them and invent what they are, defining them, or we can call them, which we need to do at the end of our code when we run it. So I'm going to define my function here. And I'm going to take all this stuff that I wrote, my pseudocode, and I'm going to put it inside of those function brackets. There we go. So I have my list of the things I need to make. I have them inside of my function here. I'm going to call my function, instead of do something, I'm going to have it be called curve left. All right. When I curve left, I'm going to list out what I want my motors to do. In this case, I'm going to go into my motors section, and I see I have large AB steer or tank. I'm going to use the tank one right here. So I'm taking large. My motors are not plugged into A and B. They're plugged into B and C. So right here where I have large AB, I'm going to change this to BC. If you have the standard robot layout that we all have, the educator bot, then BC will be your tires. The B is your left tire and the C is your right tire. Now that said, that means these motors over here, this is going to be your left motor and this is your right motor. I'm going to stop and think about this for a second. If I want to drive to the left, that means my right tire has to be stronger or more powerful in its motion than the left one. That way it is stronger and it will cause my robot to turn to the left. That said, that I want to make my left motor less powerful. I'm going to make it 10. And I'm going to make my right motor twice as powerful. So I'll set it to 20. The left motor is going to go at 10% power. And the right motor is going to go at 20%. So I should have the right motor or the right wheel turn more, which will cause my robot to turn to the left. Now, I have to check to see when can I make this robot stop with the ultrasonic sensor. Well, I'm going to use a while loop to do this. I can say while, and then inside that while loop something has to be true. So I'm going to say while the ultrasonic sensor, I'm going to go over here to my sensors, and I'm going to check in the sensors that I can pick here. I'm going to go down to the gyro sensor here, and you'll see there's only 3 things you can pick. There's angle, reset, and rate. I'm going to pick the angle because I want it to be based off of the angle of the gyroscopic sensor. So I clicked on that and it put it right in my code wherever my cursor was, which happens to be right inside where that while loop is. Now something to note, you're going to have to change what gyro port you are installed on. Right now my gyro sensor is plugged into port 2, so I'm going to put, instead of gyro 1, I'm going to put gyro 2.angle. You might want to check your robot just to see what port your gyroscopic sensor is plugged into. This should help you out if you need to change that. Alright, so what this is saying is while the gyro angle, but there's no comparison. Typically inside of one of these Boolean checks, you're checking to see if what's inside is true. So I want to make sure that while this angle is less than negative 360, or I'm sorry, it's going to be greater than, right? I'm going to be greater than, and it's going to be turning left, so it's going to be decreasing in value. As long as this sensor is above negative 360, that is basically the whole time that it is turning left, I want it to do nothing. I'm just going to put the little curly brackets, and I have nothing happening in here. It's just going to do nothing. It starts its motors, and while the ultrasonic sensor is reading greater than negative 360, it's just going to do this, which is nothing. After it hits this point, though, after it hits negative 360 degrees, it's going to kick out of this while loop and go down to the next statement, which is going to be stopping the motors, as you see there. I'm going to click on this while statement, select all the code inside, and tab it over. We're going to come back to this, and we're going to have it do stuff while it is turning. But for right now, I'm just going to make it turn and do nothing. Once it hits that negative 360 in this while loop, it's going to kick out of this nothingness that it's doing, and it's going to go to the next point here, which is to stop the motors. If I type in stop, you'll see that it knows, oh, you might mean stop all motors. So I'm just going to click on that, and it's going to stop all my motors. So let's look at our 3 steps here. It's going to curve left with this command right here. It's going to wait and do nothing over and over again until it senses that its gyroscopic angle is at equal to negative 360 or less than that. And then it's going to stop all the motors. All right, looks good. I'm going to name it. I'm going to call this NASCAR, or EV3 02 NASCAR. And I'm going to test it out with my robot. All right, so I'm going to download this. I'm going to push it out to my EV3. I click on the download button. You'll see that it downloads to your device down here. You should see that it records it. Now I'm going to go to my File Explorer, go into my downloads. I'm going to sort by the date. And you should see that as I sort by the date, clicking on this little thing up here, it's going to sort everything by the last day I did them, which in this case is this file right here. There's my NASCAR file. I'm going to click on that and drag it to my EV3. I'm going to put my EV3 on the ground here. Let's see if it works. Ah, nothing happens. Can anybody tell me why nothing happens? Very close. Can somebody tell me why it didn't do anything? Very good, very good. So, can anybody tell me why? Besides Mike. Mike has an inkling of why. I never told it to curve left, right? I defined what curve left is. This would be great for you to use if you want to think like a computer and act like a computer to somebody who tells you what to do. If they explain to you how to do something, but they don't explicitly tell you to do it, that's exactly what we did here. I'm explaining to you how to take out the trash, but I never explicitly asked you to take out the trash, did you? I just told you how to take out the trash, all the steps that you take in order to do that. But I never actually told you to do it. Simon didn't say, he just showed you all the different steps. So at the end of my code here, I have to remember to actually call that function, which is right here. I defined it, as you see here, but I didn't actually tell it to do that. So now I've told it to curve left, and this is actually named wrong. This should be something like draw a circle. That's what this would be as it was written. We're going to come back and change what curve left is, but for right now, let's just see if this is going to draw a circle. In fact, I'm going to rename it draw circle, and down here I'm going to call it draw circle. There we go. Now I've got that ready. I'm going to download it one more time. I'm going to go into my downloads folder, and you'll see a new version of your robot code just popped up, except it has a little 1 next to it. That's all right. That's the latest version of what you made. I'm just going to click this and drag it onto my EV3, and I can test it out. Let's see if it works. Your code works? Yep. Awesome. My robot moves around forever. What about anybody else's? There's one thing that could be helpful during this. Whenever you start a program, it's a good idea for you to start with your gyroscopic sensor being reset. That way, whatever it is currently at will be set at the angle 0 when you first start your program. So I'm going to do that. At the very beginning of my program here, I'm going to reset my gyroscopic sensor. How do I do that? Well, in your sensors menu here, you'll see in the gyro area there's a gyro1.reset. Just click on that and it'll drop it in there. Remember that your gyroscopic sensor will probably be plugged into a different port. Mine is plugged into port 2, so I'm going to change that right here. Alright, I've got this all set. I'm going to try downloading this version. Going into my downloads folder. I've got my newest version. I'm going to drag this into my robot and we'll see if it works. I'll be right with you, Neil. This seems to still not be working. Let me see what I can do about this code to maybe change it a little bit. I had it start with my large motor right here turning on. What if I put that inside of this loop right here? Instead of just curving left and then doing nothing forever, I'm going to take this section out and put it inside of my while loop. Now, as long as the gyro is reading greater than negative 360, it's going to be doing that driving left. Let's see if this works. I downloaded my latest version. I go into my downloads, I find that version, and I'm going to drag it onto my robot. Let's see how that works. Ah, it worked. Perfect. I could have given you the solution at the very beginning of this, but keep in mind that debugging is a part that you have to think about when it comes to programming. You almost never will come up with a solution on the first try. It's very rare. I've noticed that a lot of students that are very bright and very intelligent and used to doing very well in school will have a hard time with this. It becomes very frustrating when the things that you try to do that you think are very simple don't turn out over and over again. But you have to realize that this is part of programming. No matter how good you are at it, the syntax of you getting the machine to do what it needs to do is going to take a few attempts. And so you should just expect this to be the case. Alright, that said, we have this done. We can now draw a circle. But let's make it to where this code is a little bit more functional. Right now it can just draw one circle and that's it. Let's see how we can edit this code to make it even more functional. I'm going to go in and instead of making it draw a circle every time with this function, which this is fine, I'm going to keep this function, but I'm going to copy and paste it so I have more powers than just turning in one circle. I just copied, I clicked on the left where these numbers are here to the side of my code. I just clicked and dragged down to select all the code that I want. Or you can click at the very beginning of your code. If you don't like using the mouse like me, I think it's a waste of time most of the time, you can hold down Shift and press down on the keyboard, the down arrows, until you get to where you want. If you hold down Shift and do this, it'll just happen. It'll select all the code line by line. This is very useful if you're a coder. You don't want to have to keep on mousing around. Once you get in the zone and you're thinking purely logically, you don't want to think about all that stuff. You just want to type in the code. So I selected all this, and then I just pasted it down here. Control C and Control V. Now I have my functions here. I have a duplicate of draw circle, except I'm going to make it curve left, like we did to begin with. Except this time, I'm going to add a parameter, like we did before, to be able to choose an angle. So I'm going to call a parameter turn angle, and the type of that parameter is going to be a number. So now I have a parameter in here, and when I list out curve left, watch what happens down here in the very bottom. I'm going to take out this draw circle, and I'm going to put curve left. And you'll notice that it asks me, in its code right here, it's going to, when I hover over it, it tells me, it expects one argument but got 0. That argument is this parameter right here, the turn angle. It's asking me for a turn angle inside that parameter right there. Alright, so here in my function, that turn angle, wherever I put the word turn angle, it's going to treat it as a variable that it gets when I put in this parameter. So that turn angle I'm going to put right here. Instead of making it to where it has to drive a 360, I'm going to make it say turn angle right here. Now what that means is whatever number I put in right here, it's going to turn left until the gyroscopic sensor reads that specific number. So let's check it out. If I put curve left and I put negative 360, it should still drive in a circle. If I put 720 instead, it should do 2 circles. I'm going to test that out. It should drive around to the left until it reaches 360, and then it should keep going until it reaches negative 720 in degrees. Let me test it out. I'm gonna name this NASCAR 2, or I'm gonna call it NASCAR 720, and I'm gonna download it. All right, I've got my file downloaded. I'm gonna drag this to my EV3. And let's see if I do 2 circles this time instead of just 1. There's 1 circle. Here's my second circle. And he stopped. Perfect. My robot did exactly what I wanted. Alright, what if I wanted to turn right? Well, I'm going to take this same function that I have here. And just like before, I'm going to select all of this stuff inside of curve left. I'm going to paste it down below. And now I have another function that I'm going to call curve right. And you know what? I'm going to keep this whole turn angle thing. I like the way that worked. I'm going to change the documentation right here where it says function curve left. My previous comment said when the ultrasonic sensor reaches negative 360. I'm just going to make it say when it reaches the turn angle. Because I want my code to actually make sense when somebody else reads it and sees what they wrote, or what I wrote. That it should make sense and not just have a bunch of stuff that doesn't make sense. So down here, when the ultrasonic sensor reaches the turn angle, this case I want it to curve to the right. So instead of making the left side over here, instead of making this left number smaller, I'm going to make the right number smaller. So now the left engine is going to be at 20 power, and the right engine will be at 10 power, which means that it's going to turn to the right. The other thing is, I want to make my gyroscopic sensor move until it is less than the turn angle. Because it's going to be moving in the positive direction, and I want it to stop once it hits the turn angle, or if it goes a little bit over that turn angle. So now I've got it to curve right, and this should work. Let's see if I can get it to go in a right circle. Instead of curve left, I'm going to make it curve right, and I'm going to make it go at 360 degrees. See if I can do a circle. All right, so now I have the curve left function, I have the curve right function, and I'm telling my robot down here to curve right until it hits 360 degrees. I'm gonna rename it R360 just to see, so my robot, I can pick out the different program. I'm gonna download it. I'll go into my files, go into my downloads, find that file I just made right here, the Right 360 file, and I'm going to click and drag that onto my EV3. Let's see if it works. My robot decided not to stop. Let's find out why. See, I loaded up the appropriate thing. This looks correct. Let me just test it one more time. Yep. There we go. All right, now let me ask you this. What is a figure eight if we want to start in the same position? Now that we can turn left and turn right, let's think about it. If I wanted to do a figure eight, and I wanted to start in the same position, let's say I was starting here, a figure eight could be thought of as a circle to the left and a circle to the right. That should help you out a little bit. Think about how you can make a figure eight. Plan it out. I'll leave you with that idea. That's going to be our next project. But you have all the tools you need in order to make it. I hope you do well. Happy coding.